in the last week or so, there's been a trend of people who celebrated Charlie Kirk's assassination and then now are summarily being fired by their jobs because of their stance on it. And this is where I always like to preach I can't just give you a 1 second, here's my snap reaction. You need to have a conversation to understand, just to understand your own thoughts on a topic, but then B, to be able to correctly articulate those in a way that seems coherent. So the genesis of this is that my wife sent me one of our mutual acquaintances' social media posts where this person was essentially just espousing that he was glad that Charlie Kirk got shot because his views on school shooting and the Second Amendment, and what he essentially said was that, yes, these are tragic, but when you weigh that against having the Second Amendment still comes out on top. And so he got really upset about that because he has a child that's in school, and so I get where he's coming from, but in my opinion, as long as the person hasn't done anything wrong, who in this case was assassinated, I don't understand why you're cheering on his again, it's just his point of view. There are tons of people in the United States who has his point of view. And are you going to wish death on all of them? This is where it just doesn't, it's very confusing to me. And I can understand the duality in thought there, right? Because I don't think the Charlie Kirk assassination was good for multiple reasons. And as I've stated, not a huge fan of all of his beliefs, but he should absolutely be allowed to have them. And he provided people his platform to express their opinions and their disagreements with him. And so I really don't see what the problem is there. And so the thing that is conflicting for me is that on one hand, I am a free speech maximalist. 100%, I don't think anyone should be reprimanded for their speech. I think you should be able to say whatever you want. But at the same time, I am sure a large proportion of the people cheering on Charlie Kirk's death also, by the way, were probably cheering on people who lost their jobs during COVID when they wouldn't get the vaccination, or were championing deplatforming and censoring other people's speech for any multitude of reasons, just basically expressing opinions that they don't believe in themselves or that they disagree with. So at a certain point, I just say, F them. I don't care. Because here's one of the things that I also always say. When you're cheering on censorship or whatever, some sort of regressive policy, DEI, any of these beliefs that necessarily discriminate against one or a group of people, it will always come back and bite you in the ass. The same thing that you're cheering on to happen to them will swing around and happen to you. And so do I feel bad if this is your first time doing it and you're just expressing your opinion and you don't have the same ideology that it was good that all these people in the past have been deplatformed or fired for their beliefs? Or yeah, I feel bad for you. However, it is very unlikely that you got to that point that you needed to express your displeasure on a social platform. Not just that you thought it, because you can think whatever you want. You're freedom of thought, all you want. We can't police those. But the moment that you take to a platform to try and express the view, I do not believe that you have not expressed other views, but in reverse. So silencing people, having regressive, punitive punishments. I don't really believe that. That's very hard for me to believe. I fully acknowledge that there may be some people in that camp where it is their first time, but I cannot, I would say that's overwhelmingly unlikely. And here's the thing about that too, because I can even admit it from my personal viewpoint. When the Brian Thompson thing happened, and this is just an example, my wife told me, and I said, you get what you effing deserve. And the reason why, and this is why I say you need to sit down and have a conversation, because I could see how, oh yeah, he said this, so yeah, he's endorsing it for this other thing too. No, the reason why is because I think someone who is responsible for thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of deaths because of actions of a company that you control, well, then you are directly responsible for those actions. But Charlie Kirk, on the other hand, he never implemented any policies. He may have advocated for things that you think may lead to, but there's a lot of other extenuating circumstances, and it's very complex. But in the Brian Thompson example, his actions led directly to, in telling the company that they need to deny more claims, that is direct, that A leads to B, not A leads to, oh yeah, he's advocating for, he still believes in the Second Amendment, so a mentally ill person who wants to end their own lives anyway, but then also has access to, it just doesn't make, it's not the same. It doesn't make sense. So that's why I say you need to sit down, you need to have a conversation, you need to be able to express the way you think about things, because again, I am very conflicted about people losing their jobs. I don't think it should happen. People should be allowed to say whatever they want. But if you've tried to inflict the same thing or cheer on people losing their jobs, well, guess what? Now you've greenlit it happening to you. So what I want to do is take a look at Breaking Points. They have this discussion, but I just wanted to lay my base view on it out and then go into the conversation, because I think they have a very interesting conversation on it. I think that they align with my views, but I think I can make other points on their conversation as well. So I'm going to get into it and then continue the conversation through their video.
In the wake of the killing of Charlie Kirk, there have been recriminations coming from the right, finding anyone on social media who posted anything that they didn't like about Charlie Kirk or didn't express in their view the proper sentiments surrounding his murder. This is happening at a number of levels. There's like a organic sort of right-wing cultural effort to find these and put them in a database and contact their employers, et cetera. And there also is increasingly, it looks like, a coming crackdown coming from the federal government. Let me go ahead and start with Senator Katie Britt, who says in one breath that, Charlie Kirk was assassinated in part because he was such a beacon of free speech. And in the next breath talks about how if you're not expressing the proper sentiments, you should be held accountable, you should be fired, et cetera. Let's go ahead and take a listen to that.
The rhetoric that led us to this moment, calling President Trump a fascist, calling him Hitler, you had news organizations and mainstream media celebrating that, allowing those things to take place and be said on their networks. Right. That is dangerous. When you look at that, when you look at where we are, when you look at how we got here, now people that are celebrating Charlie's murder, celebrating a political assassination, that should never happen in the United States of America. And Maria, we must do more. We must stand firm, and there must be consequences with regards to people spewing that type of hate and celebration in the face of this. And I believe that there will be, and I certainly plan to to hold them accountable. So if you are out there and you are celebrating the political assassination of a man who was exercising his free speech, a very foundational element, a cornerstone of who we are as the United States of America, you should be held accountable. You should be fired. And that is the beginning and the end of it, full stop.
And
here's the issue that I have with that statement, is that exactly like I was just saying, she may have a more nuanced view, but that quick take of you have a minute to, to say what the basis of it is, she doesn't get to fully explain it, right? I think what I did, I took literally 10 minutes to break down my thoughts on it and why I think the way I do. But if you're just clipping and you need to be on there real quick, you don't get to, and that's a generous interpretation of what happened there, right? On the other hand, the dangerous thing is getting the government involved in these types of crackdown. Because, again, all you need to do is see whatever they implement here, wait 4, 8, whatever it is years, and it's going to be a weapon that your opponents can use against you. And a long enough timeline, your opponents will use the same weapons that you set up against you. That's how Donald Trump is able to do everything that he did as soon as he got into office at such a breakneck pace. Because you keep giving powers to the government, and they build and build and build, and they never get taken away, and then you basically give someone the power of a god, where they can do whatever they want because they're doing exactly, they're basically misusing powers that are awarded during times of crisis like this. So when you see someone from the government endorsing that there needs to be a governmental action against people's free speech, I need to be incredibly skeptical and push back against it, even if it's benefiting what you believe in, especially when it is benefiting what you believe in, because once again, it will just be used against you on a long enough timeline.
we're going to show you some of the specifics of the posts that they find objectionable. Some of them, in my opinion, I strongly disagree with. I obviously condemn political violence. We've been very clear about our position on that on this show. Some of them are actually literally just reposting some of Charlie's more inflammatory quotes. Some of them are saying it's wrong that he got shot, but I'm not going to mourn his death because he was a hateful person. I disagree with his political ideology. So those are the types of posts that they're coming after. And we're not talking about either from public figures. Every mainstream Democrat I know of has condemned the killing of Charlie Kirk. We're talking about random teachers, professors, whoever out there in the world. And Sagar, I don't even think they really care that much about the hypocrisy burn that's in evidence in that clip, because I think the sense is, and you can tell me if I'm off on this, the sense is y'all did this to us and now we're just going to do it right back.
That's part of it. That's certainly part of it, which I think we could all sympathize with if you've been victim or something, been attacked by it. I think there's also...
And that's exactly it. That is where my viewpoint says F them. Because exactly to that point, yeah, if you're cheering on someone else's job loss because they don't go along with something that you believe in, especially when it's injecting something into your body, not your body, the person who's cheering it on, my own body. I have bodily autonomy. So for people to cheer that on, that, oh yeah, I'm so glad that this police officer or this firefighter or whoever lost their job because of their own freedom of choice, or canceling, oh, I don't like your opinion on this, so now I'm going to go after and try and get you deplatformed, or anything similar to that, or fired from their job or whatever, then again, I have no room for sympathy for you. And again, the burden of it, I think, should be show a pattern of ideas, right? But at the same time, as I've made clear, I think if you're making those types of statements, something is very wrong with your brain and how you think about things. And the thing is with it is, as I used my example with Brian Thompson, I didn't go out and post it online. If you ask me what my opinion was on it, I will tell you, but I'm not going to go out on a social platform and post it for everyone to see. To be quite frank, if you're just a regular person and you're not someone out, trying to make this your job, no one cares what you think. There might be two people, but those are your friends, and you should just talk to them in person, not post it online for millions of people out there. And in fact, if you are going to make your opinions broadly known to everyone, don't be surprised that when they're unpopular, you get blowback for them. That's kind of how it works. Welcome to being an influencer 101. Yeah, you don't have any of the fame that comes along with it, but you're going to get the same amount of blowback when something that you say that's stupid gets picked up. Again, complex opinion on these things, but that's how I generally feel about it.
So I want to say this as well. The overwhelming thing I have heard from a lot of my more right-wing friends is I feel like Charlie and I were not that far apart. Everyone is like, oh, I disagreed with him on this. Mm-hmm. So to watch people celebrate his death, and let's be honest, there are extremely viral posts of people who are doing that. It's a free country. You're allowed to. I want to be very, very clear. But to watch that at an organic societal level is deeply wounding at one, and also makes you personally afraid and potentially facing retribution. I think those are legitimate feelings. So first I want to validate that. I think it's scary. I mean, for me, Charlie and I, look, we disagreed certainly, probably the most on Israel, but we weren't that far apart on a lot of stuff. And that's kind of what I was talking about earlier in our A block, where it's okay, we're just memes now, humans are memes. Well, and apparently, if somebody gunned me down in cold blood, somebody would probably find a video of me on BLM or trans and be like, fuck him. And that's, look, I got to be honest, I have to sit with that for a while and just be like.
And that's what's concerning, right? Is that exactly what he's saying, that if you have, this sets the precedent, that if I disagree with something you're saying, that I can just gun you down. And that's the differentiation between the two, right? Of Brian Thomas and Charlie Kirk, is that Charlie Kirk is just his opinion. He didn't enact laws. He's not directly affecting your life. Again, he may be putting influence out there, but it's not the same thing. It's literally his opinions. And if you think someone should die for their opinions, then how do you feel when someone else thinks that you should die for your opinions? Do you think that's a good outcome? We're just walking down the street. Hey, I'm going to just ask people, what are your opinions on abortion? And if you think abortion is, you put yourself in either camp. If I'm an extreme right winger and you say that, oh, I'm pro a woman's choice, and then he goes, oh, you're for killing babies? Boom. How do you feel about that? Does that feel good? Does that sound like a good solution to you? Because that's literally what you're endorsing here. And so, of course, anyone who has all of their opinions, and this is another, I talked about a little bit in my Charlie Kirk Israel conspiracy video, but that is exactly why anyone who is a commentator, I've seen so many people that are political commentators like this, and all of them are like, oh man, this hit me so hard. And that's exactly why. Because again, some subset of them are curating their own personalities, and it's not really what they think, but they're saying maximalist things to try and get additional attention, and I don't really think this show does that at all. But they're like Charlie Kirk, they'll just put things out there that, again, are maximalists to try and get the most amount of views, get the most attention, build as much of an audience as they can, and then so now all of their views are out there and they're on the internet, so they're there forever, and then someone can just clip it and then justify it to murder you. And again, just imagine the tables are flipped. Well, now you, looking at the people who are explicitly talking about right now, well, now you just justified, you said it's good that he got murdered, and now some right-wing person that's enraged at his assassination, they see you on the street. They find you. How do you think that ends? If it can spiral out of control with your justification that people are justified in being killed because of their beliefs. I just want to put that out there because I would just like people to think about that for a moment. Literally, what are the consequences of what you are endorsing?
Wow. Okay. That's a thing.
Can I echo what you're saying there? Because obviously Charlie and I were different on almost every issue. But you're like, there are also people out there who think I am like hateful and horrible and evil for a variety of reasons as well. And I, have no doubt that would be the case for me too.
Right.
And, we'll talk more about the Israel piece tomorrow, but it's also the case that even as Charlie Kirk and I are as different as we could possibly be politically, ideologically, it's also the case that there were some shared enemies. There were some so I totally get why I find it shocking and deeply unsettling and horrifying. And I think, which is why, I think if you are on the political left and you think it's in any way good that he was murdered, like, I don't know what you're thinking. This is not any sort of benefit to your political project, if that's what you're measuring this on. And part of this block.
And that's a good, this requires a lot more drilling down on. But what she just said there is that if you're on the left, this does not help your political goals at all, basically, right? And this was something that I was thinking about the other day, is that now that this has happened, you cannot, because the whole thing was, I feel like what I have heard from people on the left is that we want action. We want you to put up a fight. We want you to be full-on resistance against Republicans. We want you to, do whatever you can to thwart them. That was the messaging that as I understood it, coming out of the left to the leaders of the party. And so what this does, though, is now that this has happened, they have to cool off all their rhetoric. They can't, it's not just like they're talking and they have to cool it down now. They cannot meet you where you want to be. So they're going to risk even further having to step back from what was being demanded by those in the party. So now they're just going to get run over even more so. They're not going to be able to do anything. So, because that's the thing is, again, the other thing is when you see people acting in such a disgusting manner, I'll say, when you see people acting like that, it repulses people away from you. And again, do I think it's everyone on the left that was doing it? No. Do I think there are some people who maybe are closer to the center that did it because they just really hated Charlie Kirk? Maybe. But the bulk of the people who are doing it are probably on the far extreme left. And that's why I say, if they're cheering for his death, they probably cheered for all the other all the right-wingers or all the, any person who was skeptical. It could even be people in the center who are skeptical of, I don't want to get injected with something, or old crunchy liberals who didn't want to get, the COVID vaccination, or they were cheering people who said something that was viewed as inappropriate, and so they tried to deplatform. And these are the actions that the people who are on the furthest left, who are probably, majority of the ones cheering on his death. That's why I say it's more than likely that they have a, verifiable pattern of actions. And so, by the way, that's why I don't feel bad that you're now reaping the consequences that you have endorsed for years, probably now. So Yeah, that's just my take on it.
Is we are going to see very swiftly, and Stephen Miller is already signaling it, Donald Trump is also signaling it, we are going to see this used as a justification for further crackdowns on left-wing organizations, left-wing speech. Certainly pro-Palestine sentiment has already been in the crosshairs. That's going to be amped up. This will be...
And that's exactly what I was saying under the previous clip, is that, yeah, you do not want... if they put it in, if the government gets involved now, it's coming for you. So if you're on the right, the grassroots movement and going after people, cool. That's how it should be. We should be policing each other. The government should not be policing us.
Used as justification for further crackdowns.
Yeah, and but then let's get to the social question. And actually, this is it's funny. I think I came out of the woke era and said, I'm against cancel culture in all forms. But actually, more recently, we were all having a discussion, I remember. I think it was about the Jubilee fascist guy.
Yeah.
And you were like, yeah, he should be fired. And I was like, yeah, maybe he should. And so then I'm like, okay, do we all believe in cancel culture? And then in a certain extent, yes. And if I think about the movements that I have been the most critical of, BLM and Me Too. Well, nobody who's critical of Me Too says maybe some people, says Harvey Weinstein, outside of Candace and a few others, nobody's like, Harvey Weinstein's innocent and he didn't do anything wrong. You can critique the legal case, but at the very least at a social, moral level, we're like, yeah, Harvey Weinstein, fuck him, all right? Matt Lauer, fuck him. Who else is in the OG Me Too? I'm trying to think of a few other names. Like those people, but then, Me Too, the criticism, which I think is fair, is it quickly descended from Harvey Weinstein to Aziz Ansari. And that's crazy. And so to the extent that we're pushing back, it's about Aziz. Same with BLM. Anybody who was like George Floyd deserved to get murdered, yeah, I think we would all justly say, why is that person in polite society? Now anybody who says, I don't think there should be violent rioting and looting and defunding the police is stupid, if that person loses their job, I think we should say, that's bad. So that's where I am here with this Charlie Kirk thing. And maybe that's hypocritical. It may be, to be honest, because it's actually our conversations about that fascist Groyper or whatever, who was on Jubilee and got fired. And I'm like, yeah, maybe he should be fired. And so it's
apparently,
one of those
by the
where
way, he'd been fired before.
Okay, but whatever.
Yeah,
I mean, my point is just
the intellectual point
if somebody,
stands,
I saw a video of a guy who hung a swastika flag out.
Well, and here's the thing about that too, is they're private companies, and they have the right to, if it becomes surface to them, if they have a certain type of company culture that they think that you don't fit, then they have the right to fire you. I mean, that's tough to hear, right? And it's unfortunate, but I think companies try and build a culture around certain things. And I personally, I can't imagine there are a lot of companies out there trying to cultivate a culture of people who cheer the deaths of people who have differing opinions from them. I mean, I think if I ran a company, I would enjoy and actually prefer to have different opinions, because that's how you end up with the best products. But, I mean, and again, I don't think that they should be fired for free speech, but unless it's a pattern of you being a hypocrite. If you're a hypocrite, then you've made your own bed and you're going to lie in it. And that's kind of where we are. So, but yeah, the company has their own prerogative to decide that this is out, beyond the pale. And so therefore, you're not allowed here anymore. And quite frankly, at a certain level, you should probably be glad, because that company doesn't reflect your values. And I know that's going to be kind of hard to hear, right? But, you want to find a good fit where you fit in and you're appreciated. And yeah, so I mean, it's not good to hear in the moment, but again, I just don't feel bad for people who more than likely have a consistency in ideology, except for when it comes to someone who's on the other end of the spectrum than them.
Outside of his house. And I'm like, yeah, if I'm his neighbor, I'm gonna be like, hey man, fuck you. It's one of those where you hung a Nazi flag outside of that, and I'm not going to you know, I would go to court to defend his right to do so, and I would also say, go fuck yourself. And so that's kind of where I am at now with this Charlie Kirk thing, where...
And that's exactly where I am. That's why I wanted to make this video, is because, yeah, like, if you're out there with a Nazi flag, you know, if you're cheering on the death of Charlie Kirk, F you. I do not really want to be your friend, because that's, frankly, disgusting behavior, but you should be allowed to say it. So yeah, that's the thing, is that's what I'm saying. You need to sit down with someone, you need to have a discussion with them, because being able to articulate that, I think it makes a lot more sense when you're able to say, like, here's my rationing, here's why. And you know, it doesn't seem, the viewpoint is essentially more consistent than it may seem on the surface level.
I think it's becoming way too far already, and the witch hunt is ongoing. But also, if you're a teacher and you're out there and you're saying he deserved to die, I'm sorry, like, you should not be teaching children. If you're an airline pilot and you're saying he should deserve to die, you should not be in charge of flying 300 people around. You literally have a responsibility to all of these people in the background. And if you just don't care about their personal death, if you are not even just protecting responsibility, teacher, professor, social worker, etc. I mean, last time I checked, social work is about empathy. Like, what, half the people who are coming in for mental illness are all just left wing? No, you have to be able to have some sort of relations, you know. So my point around cancel culture, or shall we now...
And that is a really, 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 really good point, is that, yeah, especially, that I do agree with, is that especially if you have one of these jobs where you're supposed to be impartial, and or people's health and safety is reliant upon you, and you're so mentally fragile that you can't hear an opinion that is in opposition to your views without wishing death upon that person, well, then you're not mentally fit to be able to be in one of those jobs. You don't get the right to have one of those jobs. You can go be a customer support agent on a telephone. I don't know what to tell you. Like, you can't, if you're not mature enough to be able to accept someone's differing ideals and opinions, then I'm sorry, I can't trust you. I can't trust you to have any sort of thing where you're shaping humans, young humans, into adults, where you're being relied on for my safety to make sure I get from point A to point B, that I'm counting on you to do surgery on me. I'm sorry, we're completely done. I don't want you in any sort of position like that. And it comes down to mental health more than your actual opinion on this topic. Because again, I don't think you're mentally stable if you're cheering on someone's death because of a differing opinion.
I'll call it consequence culture, to borrow the initial... Here's the thing, the leftists were correct in one form, is that we do need guardrails on polite society for employment. And I actually think everybody at this point does kind of agree. The fight should be around the boundary, and the fight should first of all, we need to keep the government out of it. And so to that extent, it's ridiculous. But we absolutely need to look at it very specifically and have a real convo about, what does this mean? We literally, and as the meme says, we live in a society. And so for me, for a lot of my conservative friends and others, I mean, I got an email from a great friend of mine. I don't think he would mind me saying this. And he's like, you know, I walk around and I look at a barista or something, and I know they don't want to kill me, but it's one of those where I have to wonder, like, would they cheer my death? That's really scary, I think, for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And I would transpose it onto how the mass hysteria, again, over BLM, or Me Too, or any...
And here's the thing about this, too, that kind of pops into my head, is literally it feels like we're in the end times of Rome, right? Where they have the Colosseum, and it's literally people attending and cheering on death as the civilization collapses. And I think there are very real parallels between that and what is going on with this situation. Like he said, where it's, they may not kill me, but would they cheer on my death? And so, again, just very troubling, the direction that we're going, the signs that I think you can see all over. That's some of the things that I try and call out all the time to say, like, hey, maybe we need to chill out. Maybe this is not great what we're doing here. But, you know, again, do I think there's going to be an about face? It's hard to see a way out from where we are.
These other mass cancellation things where it very quickly went from legitimate issue, we have to have a national conversation, which we did, I think it's fair, to just full-on mass hysteria. People who are like, hey, I think rioting and looting are bad, are getting fired, people are getting censored, you know, all that. That was nuts. It was totally nuts. And I said so, you know, at the time. But that's the issue, is that it's very obvious that it very quickly descends from legitimate to not illegitimate, but much more on the edge, right?
Right.
And that is the cultural problem of all political movements, is that they take something which is legitimate and then it turns into a mass hysteria, power grab. And unfortunately now left, right, look, we all know now, watching the government over the last decade or so, nobody has any principles around this stuff.
Yep.
Okay, it's all just a, you know, thing about a race to the bottom. And actually I find that the most distressing because, you know, Charlie, I don't know his own personal feelings. I have never talked to him about this.
And that's why I say the government should not be involved at all, because we literally just cannot trust them. Because they've displayed time and time again, they don't actually care. They're just trying to gin us up against each other while they grab more power and centralize it, and they can exercise more control, and that's all you're getting from them. The only thing they agree on are things that A, wars, and B, taking away rights from the citizens. Other than that, they want to pretend, but they all agree on that. 100% of them agree on those two things. But everything else, they want to pretend like they're diametrically opposed, and there's no room for any nuance or any opinions in the center. So you can't trust the government, and that's why I say we can cheer on a grassroots movement of getting people with these opinions taken out of, especially jobs where they're shaping society or responsible for the health and safety of other people. However, under no circumstance should the government be administering any sort of justice or censorship.
I have a general suspicion you would be against most cancel culture. I mean, this was a person who I do think believed in free speech. At the very least, if confronted with this set of circumstances, has called for grace for people in the past who have even said terrible and objectionable things, hired some of them as well, and gave it a second chance. I tend to suspect that if confronted with it and asked in a one-on-one, I don't think he would be okay with it. But at the same time, and I'm talking about the edge cases here, but at the same time, I don't know, how can we expect to live with people in positions of power who do hold these like thoughts and are able to express them publicly while holding their job? That's a genuine question I don't know. And that's a social media question too.
Yeah.
To me.
Well,
Yeah.
I think the cultural, I think you raised some really interesting points. And here's where you're correct. The culture, first of all, we're going to get to the government piece. I think we'll be in complete alignment that government coming in and saying you can't do this, you can't say you must mourn Charlie Kirk, and if you don't mourn him appropriately, we're going to take your, take your passport, or we're going to infiltrate left-wing groups. All of that, like, we're going to be completely opposed to. And that stuff is being floated right now by Stephen Miller and Donald Trump. I don't know if you saw, he shared some TikTok calling for a Charlie Kirk-inspired, effectively, Ministry of Truth to crack down on media.
And that, I've literally made videos in my free speech video saying I really disliked the previous government for literally doing the exact same thing. So, same thing here, no Ministry of Truth for anything or anyone, absolutely not. F off. The government does not need to be involved. We can police each other's free speech. Again, that's how it should be. The government has absolutely no say in what its citizens say. First Amendment. I spoke out about it against, I decry it that Biden was trying to do it, or the Biden administration, and I decry it here. There should never, ever, ever be any justification for a ministry of truth or anything else that tries to silence any American. Full stop.
Media organizations, and I know we're going to be opposed to that across the board.
Absolutely.
The cultural piece is, you're right, it is more complex. And here's why. Because I do think that we need some level of shame in society.
Right. Exactly.
Because now people feel comfortable, like, you know, to go back to like the some of the things I oppose on the right wing and your fascist Groyper example, like people feel comfortable posting just overt Nazi shit on Maine.
Yeah, that's right.
And feel like there will be no consequences for that. And I don't think that that is healthy in a society.
I agree.
And especially when you have an intersection with what their job actually is. So for example, if you are a teacher and you have a classroom of diverse students.
A taxpayer-funded teacher, too, especially.
And you have a classroom full of diverse students, white, black, brown, all sorts of class, socioeconomic, whatever, and you're out there posting overtly racist or Nazi content, that is directly impacting your ability to do your job.
Completely.
And so for me, those are the most sort of like clear-cut examples where it's like, yeah, you can't continue to employ that person.
And I think she frames it in a really good way in that, exactly, like just imagine whatever viewpoint you have complete opposition to that you hate the most. Just imagine that someone is able to hold that belief and espouse it in whatever job they're in. Like where she's saying here, teacher, right? So imagine that, oh yeah, a teacher is espousing Nazism or fascism or whatever. Like they're teaching all of their students to become young Nazis. And so, yes, in that situation, that's why I'm saying you can't have certain jobs if you're not mentally stable enough to remove yourself and not try and indoctrinate, or, you know, you're not going to fly off the handle, or there are just certain, I think the mental health of the country has gotten so poor that it's sad, but yeah, then you shouldn't be able to do certain things because you're just not a mentally stable and reliable individual. And like, that's just where we are. And if you don't like it, work on your mental health. I don't know what to tell you. And yeah, there's certain things where there's too big of an impact. You know, you have too large of an outsized impact on the people that you interact with. And I think colleges are a perfect example of this, because I can tell you I was probably on the very forefront of it. But when I was in college, I had a communications class and there was a TA in it. So it wasn't even one of the teachers, but it was someone who was coming up and I'm sure was planning to be in academics forever. And she basically, you know, publicly admonished me for one of my beliefs. And it was just something that was like, oh, it's a socially held societal norm. And so you have to believe this certain thing. And oh, by the way, anyone who you're dating is mentally unsound. And it's like, what are you talking about? Because I have a difference of opinion from you, you're calling all of my significant others mentally unsound, and you're saying that, like, I'm weird or something. Like, shut up. Like, at that point in time, yeah, you don't get to teach at schools because you can't hear someone else's difference of opinion. And oh, by the way, like, no, it just, that rubbed me such the wrong way. And to me, it was, again, the first steps. Because I want to say this was like 2007, 2008, something like that. And so, yeah, like this was at the very beginning. This is the first signs that, yeah, ideologically captured people, or people with no amount of grace and no ability to allow others to have a difference of opinion, are starting to get into public universities. And yes, she wasn't a professor, but she was a TA, and usually anyone who's a TA in the university system is interested in going that route of education. And so that's exactly why, to me, those types of people are not allowed in institutions where they teach people, where they have an impact on people, where they are responsible for people's lives, anything like that. Sorry.
Just to add some context to, what we're talking about here with these posts. So there's a large scale effort, but organic as far as we know, effort for people to be able to effectively find these social media posts, submit them to a database. And they've allegedly got thousands of instances of, again, we're not talking about politicians, we're talking about random people throughout the country saying things they find objectionable. Now, that original database, what was the original URL? Was like Charlie Kirk's murders or something like that, where they were actively seeking these submissions, has now been taken down. They've changed it to like the Charlie Kirk Data Foundation, and they're framing their mission differently because I think they probably got some concerns from legal advice that, hey, this could actively be defamation. This could really be a lawsuit if you continue in this direction. But that's the effort we're talking about. Let's go ahead and put up.
Yeah, and I get it, right? With the name of it and stuff, it certainly seems like there's you could get in trouble for that. Also, though, at the same time, if you're posting something on the internet, it's there forever. Like that's the thing is I've always kept in mind is that when you're posting something, especially in a written format, it takes 2 seconds to just screenshot that. And now, anyone has what you've said forever. Whether it's in a post or a snapshot, guess what? Now what you said lives on forever. And so the problem with that is like people just don't, I think the internet has been around for so long now and people have grown up on it that they don't think about that anymore. And especially when so much of it is, video and that kind of thing, people are just detached from the consequences of, espousing their deepest, darkest beliefs openly. And that's the thing about it is that there's a reason why it used to be that what was the advice? You never talk about politics, religion, like those types of things. But now anyone is just, I'm gonna talk about, because those are the things that get clicks, and not everything you think needs to be online. Especially again, if you're not a public person, if you're not a commentator, if that's not what you're striving to do. Again, even on my videos, like, if a few hundred people watch them, that's a good video. In the proportion of the totality of people in the world, no one cares what I think. That's the reality of it. And so, if no one cares what I think, how many views are you getting on your thing? I guarantee you, no one cares. Try and make a YouTube channel. Try and post your beliefs and see how many views you get. Like, no one cares. Literally no one. And so, just looping back to the original point. If you are posting, though, on social media, on the internet in general, you should just be very aware that, oh, by the way, your opinions and thoughts and whatever, that is, you should treat that as permanent. As though you have a giant billboard over your head for the rest of time espousing the beliefs that you have. And oh, by the way, I don't know if you've ever, how long you've had Facebook or what, like Facebook, it's a very humbling experience to log back into Facebook and look at your posts from 12 years ago. Especially if you're around, 30, 40 years old. You go back and you look and you will want to crawl out of your skin because of the stupid things that you posted for attention, for however your mind worked back then. You will hate the things that you used to post. And so that's what I say, like, when you're out there posting, you need to keep that in mind. You need to think about, in the future, is this going to embarrass me? Because again, everything online can be dug up again and found. The Wayback Machine exists. So you can't outrun your stupid opinions.
Some of the examples of the types of posts that are being flagged and people having like they're, being put on blast, and I don't know if it's appropriate to call it doxing necessarily, but put on blast.
It's not doxing if you put your name to it.
You're right. Put on blast and having their employers called in this like mass organic effort. So here's some of them. These are some of the kind of like more objectionable ones that we found. I don't get why everyone is posting to pray for him. This was worth it for people to have guns. He said it himself. Pray for his kids, not for him. Actually, how about people pray for all the innocent children whose lives were unfortunately worth it when they died in school shootings, so people can have their guns instead of these kids having their lives. I'm not happy he died, just pointing out karma. Another one, F around and find out. His entire brand was hate and violence. You attract what you preach. His last words were gang violence, trying to pen stuff on black people. Save your breath for the kiddos killed in Colorado yesterday. I'm cheering for the assassination. I don't mind saying it. He was a bastard, deserves to be amongst the dead, should have been tortured. You can't force people to mourn someone who hated us, no matter how he died. It's okay to be happy when someone who hated you and called for your people's death dies, even if they are murdered. Call me old-fashioned. I remember when we used to be okay with shooting Nazis. Yeah. Let's put the next one up on the.
And here's the thing, though, is like, and this is why it's so confusing to me. Like, I don't, and maybe like these people are just watching way more of his content. I kind of doubt it, though, because I feel like a lot of these are just, responding to some hot take that got posted on TikTok or something, like something clipped out. And obviously, like I said, there are a lot of things that he said that I don't agree with. However, I never got the impression that he hated people. So that's where like I'm seeing a disconnect here. And that's where, like, again, I don't know how mentally stable people are that are making these type of posts, because again, as an objective person who didn't like all of his stuff, not a fan, I never got the feeling that he hated anyone. And again, that kind of flew in the face of his Christian values. And yes, there are Christian people who are massively hypocritical. But again, from the things that I have watched, which is admittedly not a whole lot, but I never got the point that he had harbored hatred towards anyone. He was espousing, in my view, things that he thought would make the country better. That doesn't come from a place of hatred. And to assign hatred towards someone's motivations, I think says more about you than it does about him or his beliefs.
Screen.
These are the edge cases.
Yeah, and honestly, to me, some of the other ones are, I'm not saying I agree with, but if you're saying I'm not happy that he died, but he was a hateful person, I don't know. To me, that's reasonable speech.
Look, and that's the thing about reasonable speech is and this is a difference from free speech, First Amendment, and also polite society. I think the clearest example we had there was I'm cheering for assassination.
Yeah, right. And that to me is like, okay, I can see why if you're an employer, that you would look at that and be like,
I'm not going to say their name. It was a nurse, right?
Right.
As a nurse, especially, let's say this is a nurse in a hospital, and presumably, let's say you work in the ER or something like that. I mean, to be honest, I'm going to be crazy if I didn't admit this. When my child was in the NICU, I'm sitting there being like, look, what if some of these people know who I am? Would they treat me differently? I pray? No. I don't think so. The vast majority actually every single person I interacted in the hospital with was overwhelmingly kind, didn't say anything or any of that. And I think that is most people in the healthcare profession. But if you have somebody like this in the healthcare profession, and you have somebody who comes in with a MAGA hat on or something like that, we don't discriminate care. That's one of the most basics of healthcare. So yeah, like, I'm sorry you can't be employed, right? And even in some of the cases of saying like, I'm happy he died, I'm like, well, actually.
Not in those fields anyway. And that's the thing is, exactly to his point, like imagine if it's like you're having a child or you're taking your elderly grandparent in, like what if someone hates your opinion so much? Again, I've established I think these people are mentally unwell. But if they hate your opinion so much that they think that, hey, I'm going to get back at him and I'm going to harm his child. Hey, I'm going to get back at you and I'm going to euthanize your grandparent. Like, or I'm not, or even I'm going to give less care. I'm going to give unpreferential treatment, right? I'm going to not tend to them as well as I should. Those types of things, like how can you be okay with that? Just imagine that the shoe is on the other foot. If you're someone who is espousing this, imagine if it's a right-wing nurse that then is upset that, imagine they find you posted about you're happy that Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And then this right-wing nurse says, oh, they might not even say it to you. They just see that you had posted it or they remember it or whatever. And then, oh, guess what? Now they don't care about your parent or your baby or your loved one. Do you think that's okay? And that's why I say, yeah, his argument makes sense, is you just have to, again, put yourself in his shoes and imagine that the person administering the care has the opposite belief that you do. And would you be okay with knowing that their mental state was so fragile that they would enact essentially retribution against you for your viewpoints onto someone that you love?
Actually, it's one of those where I don't really think that's acceptable for people who are in positions where they have to interact with the general public. I also come back to this point about social media where, I'm not sure if you know, but, sociologically, if you read about this, after the Kennedy assassination, a lot of people actually hated Kennedy and were okay with it. Some people, there's stories of people in bars who were cheering after he was killed. This was the thing. Now, in general, though, those people didn't face cancellation or whatever.
Right.
They did internally in their social group, but they weren't getting fired. You know why? Because they're not out, there's no media to go out there and say, yeah, I'm so happy he's dead. What compels a person to do that, And it's one of those where that's a sickness.
There also weren't mass efforts, though, to go and find those people in the bars.
There definitely would have been.
And put them, and put them on Black, call their employers, whatever. Put B3 back up on the screen, or B4, sorry, back up on the screen, so we can get some of the other examples here. Okay, this one on the left, literally just quoting him.
Right.
Just quoting him. His own words. I saw someone say online, if I die or I'm killed, please put my words out there. I'm proud of the things I said. I stand by them. So to act like it's offensive to put up his quotes, I think is crazy.
Yeah, that one I agree with as well. Just because of, you're literally, and this is why I say I don't agree with all of the things that he has said, because I don't. And again, yes, picking these quotes, again, some may be lacking nuance and context, but yeah, a lot of these, not great, right? So that's the thing is, but at the same time, I'm not actively cheering his death. And the other thing too is, again, this person is not espousing, yes, it's understandable that they probably have an opinion on his death because of the quotes that they have chosen to put out there. But yeah, they're just using his words. So you can't really be upset about that. Same thing with the third one on here where it's, they're just saying they don't think he's a good man. They're not calling for or being gleeful in his death. And by the way, they say, of course, it's awful he was shot. The second one on here, I don't know that that's as good of an example, mainly because at the end of it, they're saying his ideology and his words were extremely dangerous. And then, whatever. So that one is a little bit more, I think, fringe, right? Where it's kind of treading into questionable because, again, calling speech or ideology dangerous, again, I struggle to believe in that same, think that is the same as it's awful that he was shot or, literally just quoting him. Yeah, but again, that's just my viewpoint on these three. But yeah, the other two, yeah, absolutely not. People, and I think part of it might be that there's an outrage from the right, and so anything that they see, especially in the immediate aftermath, of course they're gonna flag it and they're gonna, this person should be. It's the same, again, same ideology as the left doing it, and how they have done it over the last, 8 years or whatever. And so, with cancellations and with all that kind of stuff, right? It's the same impulse. And that's why I think if you are a Republican, again, you should resist that impulse. You don't go after people who, again, very mild statements in at least 2 of the 3 of these. Like, I personally wouldn't go after them, right? Again, but I'm free speech, I think 100%. That's why I'm so conflicted and why I want to make this video, is because, again, there's a lot of nuance in this conversation. And again, I generally go on free speech maximalists. But again, when you're hypocritical and you're calling for others to be torn down and suffer consequences, well, then I have no remorse for you, and 100% you should be brought down to the same level as they are. As, hey, you mess around and you find out what the consequences are.
Next one says, let's go ahead and wrap this Charlie Kirk situation up in the next 48 hours. His killing was crazy to see. Wish that wasn't so easily accessible on my timeline. I definitely don't condone that violence. Shifting gears, y'all really try to paint this picture. He was this noble man trying to bridge America together is diabolical. This man was clearly racist, homophobic, sexist. Google, YouTube, and X are free. His ideology and his words were extremely dangerous. And the fact the American flag is being flown at half-staff is crazy work. I said what I said. I'm not going back and forth with nobody. Argue with your mama, not me. And then I tried to hold my tongue, but I genuinely do not know how any person could be saying Charlie Kirk was a good man. Of course, it's awful he was shot. So were more children at a school in Colorado yesterday, yet most of you haven't said a thing about that or any of the other 45 school shootings this year. Someone who didn't believe in.
And the other thing I'll say about the second one, because it's not that bad, but I think it is just, again, I think the thing that I take more exception with it is that it is the, speech is ideology / speech is dangerous. And that's just where I disagree with that person. So, but again, yes, it's not saying that the doesn't condone the violence, and okay, like, I get it. But yeah, I think that's why I take a little bit more exception with the second one, is just, again, because it's concerning to see that kind of language. But again, that's just me trying to show where my thought process is coming through on that one, and why I'm a little bit less forgiving of it. And again, just to be completely transparent, that's on me. That has nothing to do with this actual post as much as it does just my own personal biases.
Here's the thing for me is, like, I find the demand that people feel a certain way about his death to be really oppressive. That, like, the demand that everyone mourn and feel remorse and feel a certain way and express that feeling in an appropriate way, I think that is extremely oppressive.
Yeah, it's literally North Korea. Like when Kim Jong-un died and, like, everyone had to go out in the streets and, like, cry to the dear leader. And if you didn't cry hard enough, you got rounded up and put in jail. Yeah, exact same thing. Yeah, you can't police how someone else should feel. And that's the other thing too. That's why I say, like, you can feel however you want about it. But when you go put your opinion out in public spaces, don't be surprised when you get backlash. But you can think whatever you want. I thought whatever I wanted about Brian Thompson. I didn't go out and post about it. You can ask me and I can tell you and I can share my opinion, but don't go out and, share it with the world when no one cares. But at the same token, then you don't tell other people how they're supposed to feel and act and react to this. I mean, it's just common sense, people.
Obviously, like I said before, and there's a bunch of these, by the way, where people are literally just quoting Charlie Kirk, especially the Second Amendment one, has gotten a lot of play, that are being targeted, and some who have already been fired, just literally. In fact, there was a professor who was fired for just posting that one quote. I think that's insane. I think, expressing, we've talked before about when someone who, and you and I will disagree about Charlie Kirk and his legacy likely, but someone who was a public political figure and they die or are killed, like, you don't have any obligation to whitewash them, what they said, what their impact was, etc. You know, if it's one thing if you're like at their funeral and you're trying to make them out to be an asshole, but I think it's important. I think it's actually really important for public discourse and for democratic functioning that you can talk honestly about people who have died or were killed and what they did and what they said and what their legacy was. And a lot of this is really policing the ability to actually honestly grapple with what he believed, what the impact was, and what he was doing. And I really object to that.
We should. I think we should object to people who are fired over that type of conversation.
Yeah.
I think we should. And look, let's be honest. Most people are not. And as I said, most of this is a power grab. A lot of people are very upset. And I do think that that probably just factors into it more than anything is the level of emotion and the general feeling for people who are involved who are like, hey, a lot of these people would cheer my own death. I mean, to be honest, that's probably been my top takeaway. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess this is just how it would be. That's really sick. And there's a lot of deep badness in our culture that has even led us to that. But I do.
And the other thing that I'll point out about this is it is kind of concerning to me that this is the takeaway. And I don't think it's just him. I think anyone in media probably has the same takeaway. Again, because they saw it happen here, and then that's the conclusion that they're coming to, right? They're just seeing a very blatant example of it. It's, you know, it's kind of how I think the thing is, like, I was like borderline of like, do I call this a political assassination? And, you know, thinking about it, I go, yes, it is, right? And so when you view it as that lens, and then anyone who's also in the same or similar shoes, right? Not as big as him maybe, but they're still doing generally the same thing where they're talking about politics, they're talking about their opinions on things. And so they're trying to give their viewpoints. Again, if it can happen to him, it can happen to me. And now the biggest problem with that is, I think, and this is why I wanted to pause and talk about this here, is that then people like this who are like on the fringe, but they're still they still have some influence, right? So it's basically like allowing us in a door to talk to people who are higher up and actually making decisions, right? That's how I kind of view the function of people like Krystal and Sagar, or, you know, Tucker Carlson to an even greater extent, right? Or there's basically, it's an ecosystem, right? There's all these people and they have differing levels of influence on either their current administration or, you know, government officials or whatever. And so by this happening and there being a chilling effect, do you think, be completely objective and honest with yourself, do you think that's going to make these people more or less likely to care about the average citizen? Think about that for a minute. Because I don't think it will. I think it will make them less likely to care about the average person, to advocate for things that make our lives better, all these sorts of things. I think it will make it insanely less likely. And that, I think, is a huge problem with this sort of thing, where they're saying, oh yeah, I'm coming to the realization that people would cheer my death. Well, then he's going to care a lot less, and everyone else is going to care a lot less about populism and just be worried about getting their own. And that is very disturbing to me, because the people that I watch and the people that I make videos about their content, and I get the genuine feeling that those types of people actually care about me and you and anyone else who is just an average American. And again, by alienating them and cheering their death and by being so vitriolic that it's turning them against us, well, now there's no path to making anything better for anyone in the United States. And if you can't see that, you're either lying to yourself or you're not thinking about it critically.
I think we should all also just put some baseline stuff on the table if we're all going to be honest. Everyone believes in a little bit of cancel culture, like a little bit. The question,
it's a question of where do you draw
the line. That is a social question. As I said here with that nurse, you got to go. Teacher, got to go. Social worker, you got to go. American Airlines pilot, you got to go. If you are generally in a position, especially of responsibility, power, and if you're taxpayer funded, it's like I felt this way about the whole trans thing in classrooms. Same thing. I'm like, oh, you think you have a right to our taxpayer dollars and to say what you want? No, absolutely not. And this is just generally what it broadly gets to of the question around norms for us and shame. So yeah, if you literally are a open fascist, you're like, I don't believe in democracy and I think Hitler was good. Like, yeah, you got to go, man. Like, you can't be generally employed here just for polite society reasons. We do need some shame. If you actively say Charlie,
and exactly same thing. Once again, think about the opposite, right? So if you're on the left and you're crying that you're getting fired because you espoused some maximalist ideological positions, well, guess what? Think about the opposite. Do you want to be working with a Nazi? I mean, that doesn't sound like the ideal working condition. So yeah, it is not surprising that we are seeing companies actually act on these people who are posting, again, a maximalist view. Whether you think you are or not, you hold a maximalist view by thinking that it's good that someone is killed for their ideas. And that's just what it is.
Deserve what he got, I think you got to go. I really do. And I don't think that you should ever be in a position, let's not say ever. At the current moment, you should not be in a position where you're especially in a position of responsibility and or generally reflective of what a company's values are. Now, part of the issue, as we've said as well, is that it goes into the realm of mass hysteria really quick. And so what we need to do is kind of separate those two things because look, we're already in the race to the bottom. I already know none of this will penetrate the national conversation. It's obvious, okay? Yeah. It's just people are out for blood. People were out for blood during Me Too and BLM. Everybody knows it. It was obvious.
And that's a very good point as well, because the problem is, and this is, again, a point I had made, is that in the current climate of attention and the algorithm and all this kind of stuff, the only thing that's going to get any sort of traction is something with a maximalist view. And so any sort of view like this that is nuanced, that, hey, we should kind of talk about it and we should make, here's why I think this, and a longer form, and no one wants to watch this kind of stuff. That's the problem. And so when that is happening, you're literally just reaping what you're sowing. And so no one in the mainstream media, because they need to get as much, they're especially in trouble, they're not going to talk about this kind of stuff. And that's the problem. Because that's a leading indicator, like that's where we're headed. And that's how we end up where we are now. Because people were calling him a Nazi and a fascist and all this other stuff. And then when you think I'm protecting the country, when you're a mentally deranged individual and you think I'm protecting the country from a Nazi, well, no, he's not actually a Nazi. He's not actually a fascist. He just has a different opinion from you. And so words do matter. And are they going to back down from their, doomerism? No, because it gets clicks and it gets likes and it gets money. So there's no incentive for them to actually have a common sense, sane conversation about what happened and what the appropriate response should be. And oh, by the way, most of them are only mouthpieces for political parties anyway, and so they want to help them roll out additional censorship against you and me. So, of course, this is not going to get picked up. The common sense, rational conversation is not going to get picked up.
and it was used as a political tool, also to go after people's enemies to great effect, and it also led to a massive pushback. So that conversation you were talking about earlier, I forget who, I think Glenn might have written about Christopher Hitchens. Yeah, I was reading about it. I was like, oh, that's very interesting. I hadn't thought really about that. And look, we don't have to have hagiography for every person who dies. It's not required. This is a free country, and you can believe in a special. Actually, probably important actually to sit down and kind of say, okay, what are the benefits, etc. What was this person's legacy? You could talk to your children about it, but there is a big difference also for coming out and just outwardly cheering it on. And actually, I would say the sickness is not just the people who post it publicly. The anonymity is personally what gets me the most, because those are the ones with hundreds of thousands of retweets and or likes, and you're like, okay, like that? I mean, when there's no consequences potentially, people are like very willing to hit the retweet button, very willing to hit the like button.
Here's the thing, though, is that there is some value in that. I kind of disagree with him here, because the thing is that when you have that, you can get the pulse of what the average person thinks. And yes, it's rough, right? Because again, people can get away with adding volition to something that, we can think is repulsive, right? Like the cheering of someone's death. However, if you actually, if you want to get an unbiased opinion of someone's truest thoughts, if you want to understand that people are effed in the head, here's the proportion of people in society today that also believe that Charlie Kirk, it was good that he was assassinated. Well, then you need to have some sort of mechanism to be able to register that thought. And so, yes, it is kind of a dark hole, because it allows you to show support just by, hey, I'm not going to think about I'm not going to think about my opinion, which is what I espouse, right? I think you should have to think about it. Why am I cheering this person's death? Let me articulate it. Yes, I do think that is healthier. However, once again, as a mechanism for understanding the sentiments of society at large, I don't particularly have a problem with the anonymity.
And that is the same irony and dehumanization that led to his assassination. That's the part where I really find sick, because everyone's hiding behind their keyboard. People feel no way whatsoever about hitting RT on he deserved it or lol or joking about it. I mean, that's the same LeMayo, you're gay on the bullet. It's the same mindset. I'm not equating the two whatsoever. I'm saying, though, that mindset, and listen, I've been guilty of it too. I'll be free and admit it. I'm a human being. Sometimes you see a joke which is cruel as shit, and you're like, that's so fun. You know what? I'm done with that. I'm done with that after this, because I see it now.
One thing I will say, though, is, look, I haven't done a comprehensive.
And just as a side point on this, I think 100%, I literally was just having a conversation about this. Children shouldn't be on the internet. That's the problem. When you're allowing them to go into chat rooms and Discord and even have a phone when they're, young, especially younger, right, in their formative years, that's how you get to this point. When you are allowing them to, they're just the shooter, right? Tyler. There's literally, it just came out, it was sent to me, of him on his computer, and he's gaming away, and okay, I don't, he grew up with it. So yeah, then it's desensitizing, especially when, because I'm not arguing against video games in general, right? I'm a gamer. I think it's great. I think there are a lot of great things. You can make friendships in games, but you don't need to expose children in their formative years to people. It's so much more ubiquitous now, right? And the other thing too is there's a big difference between gaming with your friends when you have a LAN party and you're all there in person, and versus getting on to some sort of MMO or like Roblox now, where you can interact in chat rooms, and like there's groomers in that game. Like literally you can just Google Roblox and pedophiles and like good luck. Have fun with that. But that's exactly the thing, is that it's so different. Like the system that we operate in is so different now than what it used to be. And so you can't advocate for the exact same things because it's not the exact same world. And I think people, like, you think about the internet, how you use the internet, right? So like you're on your phone, you're sending memes to your friends, you're using ChatGPT in a productive way, you're doing these things. So like that's how you envision the internet. But like there's a whole ecosystem out there, and mentally ill people are on the internet too. And do you think it's good for a mentally ill pedophile to be able to seek out and interact with your child? Well, by allowing them to have a phone and allowing them to have unsupervised access to the internet, well then guess what? Now you have no idea what they're able to do. And you think about even your phone, you're like, oh, it's just a phone, it's not that bad. No, you can download apps. You can access the internet, right? Like, these are the things, is like you can't allow, in my opinion, I think it is irresponsible as a parent to allow your child to have access to these spaces in their current form. Like again, you may not even be aware of this is how it is, but I'm a pretty online person, and like it's not good. That's why I constantly tell my wife there is no way, 0% chance that our daughter is having a phone before she needs it, and even then she's getting one of those like 5 pre-programmed number phones. There's no way. So again, and this is just honestly a warning, if nothing else, for anyone who has children and is thinking about getting them a phone. Don't. And I think again, this is why you're seeing like a lot of these shooters and stuff like that with like these insanely online personalities, is because they grew up in it. And now you're seeing what the actual consequences are of allowing children to have unmitigated access to anything that they want on the internet. So again, just my take on it. It's an aside, right? It's a pretty big aside, but I think it's worth calling out, especially given, the online nature that a lot of these now school shootings seem to have. It doesn't seem to lead to particularly mentally stable individuals when you're growing up with this thing.
Study of the sentiments that are being expressed, the people that are being put on blast. But, when we were trying to compile some of the worst and the ones that you and I both would be like, you shouldn't be fired for that.
Yeah.
There were way more of the, you shouldn't be fired for that.
Well, that's why I'm comparing it to BLM and Me Too. Most people are not out there being like, hey, George Floyd deserved to die, okay? There's a big difference between that and saying, oh, I don't think that violence and looting is justified because of a dumb MLK quote, which is out of context. Now, a lot more people got fired for the latter than for the former. Same with Me Too. A huge number of the quote-unquote Me Too cancellations were complete bullshit, and or were ones much better left off to HR and a conversation or whatever than actually being able to be go. So yes, and look, in some ways, maybe you could take that away as a good thing, in that most people are not, most people are good. I don't think that they actively want people to die, but that's kind of why I brought it to the anonymity conversation, because that's important, where behind the screen, they'll hit the retweet button.
Yeah.
He deserves to die.
Well, and
that's sick.
Did Elon make likes public again? Did I see that? I don't know if that's true or not, but they should be public. I think they should be public. I think.
Wait, no, for my own sake, I don't want that.
You don't want that public?
Well,
I want them public.
I use them as bookmarks. I don't always like when I like something, it's not that I like the post. It's so that I can go to my likes. You can, but it's not. Listen, if you look at your profile,
adjust your
yes, but then I have to click a different page. The like page is very easy. You
can't be against the anonymity and be like, I still want the likes to be private.
I don't like them I don't like them because I want to like them. Listen, fine, make it public. All right, go. All right, my following list is public. My followers are all public. Go ahead. If you want to audit me, be my guest.
Here's what I'll say, and then I do want to talk about the government piece, because that's honestly, to me, the scariest piece. Is if we had a healthy culture I would have confidence that, you know, the hysteria, that it is already a hysteria, like a witch hunt hysteria for sure. The people that are being tagged who just like quoted Charlie Kirk or whatever, and they're being fired and their employers are being called, like, it's crazy. Okay. I would feel less stressed about that if we had a healthy culture, but we don't.
Yes.
And so, I mean, that is the sort of thing, like you said, everyone does believe that some things are out of bounds, that you can't just like say literally anything and not think there are going to be any consequences in your life, right? Where you draw that line is a constant sort of like ebb and flow, tug of war in the culture. It shouldn't be from the government. It should come organically from the culture, as you have these cases where it's like, okay, well, that went too far. Now we're going to draw the line here. Or, you know what, maybe we shouldn't this has gotten out of control. We need to be more whatever. But I think part of what is so unnerving is I don't think any of us have confidence that we have a healthy enough culture to draw these lines and boundaries in a place that is going to be sort of like broadly
I totally agree.
accepted.
And the reason I especially feel like the worst about it is because I can see the American right wing doing it now. And I have no doubt whatsoever that when the Democrats are in power, that it's going to flip. And it'll be the exact same. There'll be truth and reconciliation.
And that's exactly my point, is that, yes, if you're cheering for it now, it will come back and get you later. That's why I'm saying maximalist freedom of speech. They should not lose their jobs, but I don't feel bad for them that they do. Because again, they probably, at least the ones that have cheered on other people losing their jobs. But that's exactly it. That is exactly the point. That's the point I constantly make. If you think that it's a good idea for these people to lose their jobs, well then I don't feel bad. The next time I make a video like this, it's going to be because right-wing people are losing their jobs because now the left wing has went after them for something, them cheering the assassination of some left-wing political commentator. It's literally just going to flip. It's going to flip the other way, and then I'm going to say, I'm going to make this exact same video, but switch left with right and right with left. And that's what's going to happen. And so that's why I say it should be free speech. No one should be affected by it. But yeah, it's just, is that going to actually get through? No, of course not. So, again, in 4 years, I'll be back here again.
Commissions, it'll be all out. Anybody who advocated immigration restriction or whatever is a Nazi. It's going to come full force back. Maybe they'll be more polite about it, but considering the BLM environment, considering Me Too, like this is baked in my opinion, to like the broad like liberal industrial complex. It's really baked into any political power movement. Maybe the truth is that that's always been a hallmark of American political culture and power, is not just use, but like to have big tentpole events become power grabs in the last 25 years. In our initial reaction, the reason I focused so much on 9/11, and I knew this was coming from a mile away, I could see it coming, is because think about what it was like at that moment, where they hate us for our freedoms. I mean, by the way, you want to talk about real cancel culture? Like go back and think about the Iraq War and people who spoke out of it. They didn't have no internet or whatever to make their own career. They were dead, gone from the culture, dead. And that is scary. And that's part of what I want to avoid more than anything. But unfortunately, and this is a segue to the government piece, where you saw how quickly it went from they hate us for our freedoms and to Saddam hates us for our freedoms. I mean, that was a 2-year period. And then we're invading Iraq. And like, that's the thing I worry about.
And losing civil liberties, we never got
Exactly, with the Patriot Act. What is it, October something, 2001 was the Patriot Act that people didn't remember famously in the Fahrenheit 9/11 documentary. They didn't even read it. And they rubber stamped. And I had thought actually that things had changed with a lot of the reaction, but I believe today that it is the exact same. I don't think anybody has learned any lessons whatsoever from the post 9/11 era. And also inevitably, what I always caution people is if you don't act from a more principled view and you and at the end of the day, people were elected, we elect you to take a breath and to be stewards. Like, we're podcast, we can fire a take. What the consequences are not that high. The consequences are very high when you're in the government. And that's exactly what happened after 9/11. We had a bunch of people who were like, hey, this is a pretty convenient time for a little power grab. And it never came back. And then what? Obama was elected as a rejection of that. And what happens? He turns it up on steroids. And then what happens after that? Trump comes in. He's like, hey, I got all these powers. Might as well use them. Biden never retracts any of them. Now we're on the verge of a Venezuela regime change operation under a 2001 AUMF for terrorism.
All right, and I think that's a pretty good place to cut it at. I just wanted to get, essentially their take on, okay, here's the free speech angle. Here's, some of the things that are going on. Here are their thoughts on it, because I think a lot of Sagar's, I'm very well mirrored on his, and it sounds like Krystal is actually kind of the same opinion as well. So, yeah, 100%. I'm kind of in the same boat there again, but I am very much on the free speech side. But yeah, I have no remorse for anyone that does get affected, because, again, I find it very likely that those people were probably doing the same thing to right-wingers. But then again, when it swings back around again, I won't feel bad for right-wingers if they were, cheering people losing their jobs on the left in this moment. So anyway, it's a very complex conversation. That's why I say ask people what their actual opinions on things are. That don't just identify with a party. That's not healthy. You need to be able to articulate, I think this about this certain thing. I think this about this other topic. I think this about... You can't just... Don't put yourself in a box. Be able to think about and actually articulate why you believe what you believe, because otherwise, what is even the point of living if you're just going to go along with every single point and opinion and whim that some politician that you don't know tells you should think this about this topic? That's just my take. I don't know. I like to think deeply about things. That might be uncomfortable for some people, but that's, I think, the only way that we save the United States. Anyway, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you appreciate this type of content, give me a sub. That does really help the channel grow. And if you have made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.